So I'm Andrea Clegg. I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for 42 years this year. Not quite sure where those years have gone. My clinical background is burns, breast and plastic surgery. But for the last sort of 15, 16 years, I've done more around education and strength-based coaching, those types of things. So that's where I am at the minute.
And I'm James Thomas. I'm a radiologist by trade. I've been in sort of clinical management roles now for quite a few years. I started off in sort of teaching roles as well. And what I've discovered over the course of my career is actually clinical management and teaching are very similar. It's all about supporting people to be the best that they can be and do things. And so it's kind of coalesced. Andrew and I got to know each other when we were working in a different organization together, all around the same kind of stuff about supporting people, promoting people, helping people come together around a shared purpose.
And I think the part for me is that we were stalled a little bit with the work that we did in the other organisation because of COVID, and then James went and left me and came to the organisation that we're both in now. So it was brilliant to be able to get back in touch and start and pick up where we left off. Really, having said that, the podcast was not part of
the
original plan at all. The podcasts were very much a corridor conversation. It was morning, Andrea, how are you? I'm thinking we should do a podcast. Yeah, okay then, let's give it a go. So that's where it originally came from. And then it went a little bit quiet for a while. And then James is one of these people who, I love him to death, and I can say this because I love him to death, is that all of a sudden that you get a barrage of emails and WhatsApp messages to say, what do you think to this? What do you think to that? And before I knew it, I was summoned to his office at a specific time to come and look at his new equipment, and the podcast was born. So it was literally as thought through, as they say in Yorkshire, on the back of a fag packet. But then that's where the original idea came from.
And it really was a 2-minute conversation. I've been listening to some podcasts. There's Rosebud with Giles Brandreth, and there's a couple of other sort of interview type podcasts where they're a little bit different to the normal kind of commercial interviews, that they're going into people's backgrounds and, tell me about your dad, tell me about your mum, where did you grow up, that kind of thing. And I find that really interesting. But I was thinking there's nothing more interesting about a famous person than there is about any of our colleagues. They've all got interesting stories, and I personally would be just as interested in any of them. And at the same time, I know that there's a lot of really extraordinary people working in the health service, and I think what we do here is genuinely magical. I think looking after other people that you don't even know is probably the best thing a person can do with their lives, and some of these stories need to be told. And the two ideas just kind of coalesced in my mind one day. It took a 2-minute conversation with Andrea to get her on board. There is no one else I would want to do this with, and I knew that Andrea would be up for it. I explained it to you. I didn't even need to describe it to you. You knew exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. Said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And I think the part that sort of hooked me in was this person behind the job. And because of the work that I do around coaching and education and those sorts of things, I'd already had lots of conversations with people that I thought I knew. But actually, once you get into that coaching situation and you start unpicking and peeling back some of the layers, there's a whole new person that sits underneath that you don't get a chance to be able to talk up to about and during your day-to-day work.
We both feel like, particularly these days, those kind of human stories need to be told. It's very easy to sort of say nurse, doctor, pharmacist, and particularly even in work, we get into those roles and we come and we sort of act a part. But actually, we're just people. We're just normal people trying to do our best, and we've got a particular role in the health service, but we're just people. And I think once you've seen the person behind the role, then it humanizes everything. People are nicer to each other. People are more appreciative of other people's roles, and that ultimately then feeds back to doing better for our patients.
Yeah, and I think the other part for me is we're not really in favour as a health service at the minute. Sort of everybody was out there clapping on their doorsteps for COVID and really recognised that, you know, we were doing an amazing job. And then COVID ended, and all of a sudden, you know, we were back under the spotlight, but not for very good things. And I don't believe that we were amplifying all the amazing stuff that's still going on. Those people that cared for you during COVID are still here, still doing what they did then. You know, as tired as we all were, but actually they're still doing amazing things every single day. So the guests are originally, the very first few podcasts were people who we knew and we'd probably worked with before, so we knew that they were going to have a good, be able to string sentences together and not get too nervous about the whole process. And they knew that it was very new for us, so it might never ever get anywhere. A lot of it depended on, you know, how it went, how James picked up the editing side of things.
People that we knew that they wouldn't mind us wasting their time, basically. If we spent an hour recording with them and it never came to anything, that would be okay.
Yeah. And I think so that the first sort of three were those types of people. And there were one guy who we both absolutely love, Irvin, who his podcast was so amazing. But because he's got tell us about his voice, James. What did you say about his voice?
What did I say about it? It's very similar to mine in that it's quite deep and booming, but his even more so. And he's also very quietly spoken, and the combination of deep, booming, and quiet just wasn't working with our microphones. And when we listened to the recording back, we could hardly hear a word he was saying. And my very kind of beginner level editing skills, I just couldn't lift his voice and settle ours down and get it all right. It just wasn't going to work.
But the actual content was just amazing, and obviously you'll have heard it as part of the episodes. But we asked him to come back, and he was just so humble about it. Wanted the fact that we loved what he'd said, and we wanted him to do it again. And actually, it was better the second time round because I think he knew a little bit more. A little bit more what to expect.
I encourage you to listen to that episode, Irvin McCarney. So each of our episodes are titled for the person who it is, and that's part of our whole thing, is that we're really respectful of our guests. So we could have called it, you know, a nurse's story or something, but no, we've called it Irvin McCarney. Have a listen to his. He's got a really interesting story of growing up elsewhere, coming to the UK as a young age, training to be an aerospace engineer, working in airports, having a bit of an epiphany, which I won't spoil for you, that made him feel like I want to be a nurse now, and then retraining as a nurse. And he's an amazing guy.
Yeah, and he's just won two of our staff excellence awards as well. So we saw him first is what I would say. And I think the other part for me is the technical side. So literally, I just turn up into James's office with my handbag and sit down, because James is absolutely the technical whiz at all this. So he's the one with all the gear, and he's the one that does all the editing. He usually sends me on a Sunday afternoon, just as I'm sat down after dinner, and my husband and I will listen to his amazing editing. So I can't take any credit whatsoever for the editing side of it.
All the gear, but no idea. I've watched some YouTube videos and I've worked it out. But
it does an absolutely amazing job. And sometimes, you know, when I'm listening back and I'm thinking, oh, that was pretty good. I don't even remember saying that. We're quite, and then he'll message and say, we're quite good at this, aren't we? And I went, well, yeah, it seems so. People are still listening.
People like it.
Yeah.
The other guests then, so as the podcast has got more popular, we've then sort of sought out people. We want a variety of people. So what we want is for these first few episodes, at the very least, the first sort of 20 to 50, we want to showcase a variety of different roles in the NHS. So we've had nurses and doctors, and we've had porter. No, we had a cleaner.
Cleaner, yeah.
We've had a variety of different managers. We want to go right through all of the various different professions in the organisation. We have AHPs coming on soon. After that, it will be, I suspect, people approaching us. We've already had some approaches from people saying, I know someone who'd make a really good guest.
Yeah, and I think the sometimes the recommendations that come from other people are what I would call your usual suspects. And we probably know quite a lot about them anyway. So we have tried to go a little bit left field. And so far it has been really successful. And I was talking to somebody this morning on the phone who she'd requested a specific guest, and that were Dr. Noor. And she said, oh, crap, it was so good. It was so nostalgic. Took me right back. And the question that I always ask other people is, even when they know somebody, were there any surprises? Were there things that you didn't know? I asked that of Gerard as well. And he said, oh yeah, there was definitely some surprises. And then that makes me feel that we've done our job, because actually it's not just the person that you see on the surface of things. There are things that we managed to get through the conversation as well.
And that goes to the heart of what our podcast is really, is that everybody's really interesting. I really do believe everybody's interesting. You just have to ask them the right question and find it.
Yeah, so that literally is within the last few weeks. So the guests that we've had so far have all been from the organisation that we're currently working in. But I've been approached by 2 people through, dare I say, TikTok. And then obviously
Get you down with the kids.
I know, get me. Well, my grandson thinks I'm a proper cool granny because I'm doing a podcast.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've reached. I've had a couple of contacts also from outside saying I'd like to come on, or I know someone who'd like to come on.
Yeah.
We've been really careful that this is not a podcast. Only Human, after all, is about people who work in healthcare. It's not people who work in our organisation. It started with people who work in our organisation because those are people that we know. Yeah. But it's not about that.
So I think the guests, like I say, the original ones we chose for specific reasons. And when James was doing all the WhatsApping and sending me all the emails, there were literally scripts, and that scared me to death.
We did have questions, and they're still here somewhere on the shelf.
And that really, really scared me, because there's nothing worse for me than thinking that I've got to read something and speak out loud. So we quite quickly got rid of that, and we will do a Christmas special, I think, about the bloopers around the introduction. So that took me for absolute ever, and I could see James' face as saying, for God's sake, Andrea, just do it. And I literally couldn't. So my nervousness, I knew I wanted to provide an environment that wouldn't make people feel like that. So to be fair, we do very little prep with our guests.
So I when the guest comes into the room, we have a little chat with them. We sit them down. We set all the microphones up so that they're used to the idea of it, and we talk for maybe 5-10 minutes about the podcast, about them, about their day, and then at some point I will reveal that I've been recording, and I play a little bit of it back. Just it's a sound level test, really. But what it also demonstrates to them is that it sounds fine when they're just chatting away, and that normally settles them down a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the bit for me is that when people finish, they always say, "Oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought," and that's the reinforcement of actually what we're doing is the right thing to do, and literally it is just that conversational thing. There was a couple of people who did stutter and stumble. However, James's amazing editing skills, you would never have even known that. So it is that settling down. And each of us that choose the guest, so we both have a list, interestingly. We come together with the list, and it's very, very similar people on it, or actually the same people. And I will usually say to the people that I'm putting forward, I want us to touch on this, and this, and then they just come and we bring that out in the conversation.
It's really interesting, I think, because as clinicians, as patient-facing clinicians, we are used to sort of being on show. You walk onto a ward in a uniform. Everybody's looking at you. All of the patients and all of their relatives, they're all looking at you. And you are very conscious, at least I am, and I suspect you are, and everybody else, very conscious that you are on display, you are playing a role, you're playing a part. And so you would think that coming onto a podcast and sort of being on show and playing a part is is the same, but it really isn't. Actually, when people are talking about themselves, because you put a little mask up, don't you? You put I've got my doctor face on now, and I can go on the ward and perform as a doctor. But when I'm being James, it's a really different sensation, and that comes out with people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Some of the most confident people are sort of quaking when they sit here.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. But like Andrea said, we used to start with a script. We don't have anything anymore, and I make a point of clearing the desks. There's literally nothing on the table. It's just a conversation between three people.
And getting used to the microphones up close. That's usually the worst thing. I've nearly ended up with 2 or 3 black eyes because James likes to put the microphone really close to my mouth, even though I know that I've got quite a loud voice. So yeah, it is just that. And I think it goes back to the clinical things as well. How do you settle a patient?
Yeah.
How do you settle a patient that's really, really nervous about a procedure or something that's going to happen? So we've got all of those skills, and that's what I teach all the time. We're not, when people come to one of my sessions around essential conversations, I'm not trying to teach them something that they don't already know. All I'm trying to do is to bring practice into education. So for me, that's the easy thing to do.
That's a really interesting point, I think, because I think as clinicians we are used to settling people down. Now that's you go to clinic to see a doctor or a specialist nurse. You've got a 10-minute appointment slot, and by the end of it, you're talking about some really intimate and important things. Yeah. And the clinician you're speaking to, it knows how to do that. They know how to settle you down and form that bond and form a relationship where you can start revealing things and talk about some really meaningful stuff. So, we know how to do that.
Yeah.
I think for me, the mission is twofold. It's that we really want the sort of human stories behind the uniforms and behind the hospital doors to be told. I think we're surrounded by such interesting and amazing and people that we really want their stories to be told. The second part is, I think, that we are just normal people. And the more that people out there see people in healthcare as normal and can imagine themselves doing that job, then we can attract some other amazing people in. We've had some fantastic stories on the podcast of people who've got into healthcare via sort of odd routes. They've been inspired by a nurse that has been treating them or a relative, or they've heard something being said, or there's been some other trigger that's made them sort of find a mission into healthcare, and they've imagined themselves in that role. Thought, hang on a minute, maybe I could do that, and then they've gone and done it. We really want to inspire that in people as well. We're not special. We're just some people who've got a particular job. Come and do it with us.
Yeah, and I think the other part for me is you going back to a little bit about what James said before about we're always on show as healthcare professionals, but you also don't know who else is listening. The things the way that you are with patients, the way that you speak to each other could be the inspiration for the next sort of nurse, doctor, or whoever. But also it is that hard work. It is tough sometimes, but actually it is a lot of fun. You meet some amazing people, both in patients and in colleagues as well. There's parts of the podcast where we ask people to remember certain patients or certain situations, and that's when you see that I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I'm sad, and just literally listening to people and the emotion that goes through their voices. Brings back floods of memories of patients from my perspective, and I know that's the same for James, and it goes back to that Maya Angelou saying, they may never remember your name, but they'll always remember about how you made them feel. But that's reverse for me. Patients, how patients have made me feel may never ever know that, and I've always worked in quite emotive areas. So my clinical background is burns, breast and plastic surgery. So the psychological care and psychological support for those patients is massive and huge. And I'm really proud of that because I know that I've learnt my trade at the bedside of those patients. Because actually that's what makes me the compassionate leader that I am and able to do this podcast.
So our podcast, Only Human After All, it's available currently on Apple and Spotify and on Podbean. I'm looking at getting it on a few more platforms. At the moment, it's fortnightly. We did wonder about weekly because there are so many people to speak to. Even weekly, it's only 50 people a year. That's really not a lot considering there's sort of millions that work in healthcare. However, there is a bit of a time limit factor with Andrea and I's time and the effort involved in editing. I think the future might be a sort of continue with a fortnightly normal episode, but maybe another little episode. And we've been discussing, haven't we, about whether or not we change the format for this to intermediate ones, whether it's just you and me talking about a bit of health policy or health promotion that's important to us that week. We haven't quite decided on that yet. But like I say, even just doing it fortnightly, that's 25 people a year. There are, 3-4 million people who work in the NHS? Yeah, we're barely scratching the surface.
Yeah.
There's so many stories out there.
Yeah.
There'll be no end to this.
And I think that's the part for me is we're feeling a lot more confident with it. We know that people are listening, and we've got repeat listeners and new listeners. I think the thing that I would say to people is, give us feedback, because sometimes it can feel that it goes out into the ether. We get some feedback from the people that we work with and some of our regular listeners, but just for people to give us more feedback if they want to be involved to let us know through those platforms, that would be amazing. Because I think the bit for me is, like you say, there's 3 million people out there, and we just want to know more people, and we want to know more stories. For me, healthcare is the best way to promote healthcare, and the people that work in it are through stories. So if you're interested in our podcast, please leave us feedback. We really value that. We have made changes along the way. You can
Changed the music recently.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that via the place you listen to your podcast. We've both also got LinkedIn accounts, so you can leave us a direct message through LinkedIn. But we just love to have backwards and forwards conversations with people, and listen to their feedback, listen to their perspective, and then hopefully we'll be able to get other people onto the podcast as well.